in terms of education financing, I really would like to get up on Beacon Hill and try to work on and see how the state can do a better job of helping municipalities, so it's not always on the backs of residents. And it's a very hard issue. I've met many people. I don't have children yet in the Westboro school system. I hope to someday. But I've met many people along the course of this campaign that have said, I don't have kids in the school system. Maybe there should be a way for me to pay less. But on the flip side, I've had many parents, especially in Upton, as I mentioned, that's been struggling financially, that have said to me, I wish I could pay more. I wish I could do more to pay for my child's education. And my understanding is that when the override failed in Northbridge, a lot of the extracurriculars and the sports programs were being, in jeopardy of being cut. And so a group of parents came together and essentially created a nonprofit organization to help keep those things going. And, it's certainly a very difficult thing, but I think it shows that the community does support education here. And then fees are obviously also a real challenge. I know Westboro has introduced fees, for athletics and activities, and I think that also makes it hard. It makes it problematic, for kids to be able to participate in different things. But I think education and school financing are really big, important issues for me. I'd like to work on the Special Education Circuit Breaker Fund, looking at the way Chapter 70, the local aid is allocated, and then also looking at the way charter schools are funded. But just looking at the Chapter 70 school aid formula, Northborough last year received about $14 million, and
Right.
which is important. It's based on the way the formula breaks down. But then I look at the Chapter 90 formula, which is essentially obviously the way that roads are funded, and
Yep.
Northbridge received about $365,000 from that fund. And I've driven many times on roads in Northbridge, and it just seems to me like public works and infrastructure are major issues that are facing this community. I know that it was like 101 to a 98 vote regarding the DPW barn, that would have cost an extra couple $1 million. But I know that public works is something that a lot of residents in town here have brought up to me, in terms of road paving and bridges being closed and things like that. And, I think it's important also to look at the structure of the way that Chapter 90, is funded. I believe it's 58 or 60% of it is based on the amount of roads. I think Northbridge has like 71 miles of roads, and then the rest is split between the amount of residents and the amount of people that work in the town. So I think just looking at local aid formulas in general is also important to me. But as I say, with my background as a teacher, education is definitely the area where I feel the strongest and what I would bring to the table, but I certainly understand that as a state rep I need to be conversant in many different areas. So.
A couple of questions.
Sure, yeah, I mentioned a lot.
No, that's
so,
all right.
yeah.
On the Chapter 90, on the lottery money now, they kind of allocate it based on ticket sales.
Right.
So would you allocate Chapter 90 money based on gas sales? Because that's what Chapter 90 money is.
It's an interesting idea that I
Gas
think is
tax.
definitely worth looking at. As you point out, I think that's an interesting and probably a good correlation. Looking at the amount of people, gas sales can mean a lot of things, but it generally, I don't
That's
always
where the Chapter 90 comes
Yeah,
from.
no, I understand.
And the reason they allocated the lottery that way is because they said, well, if you're buying tickets in that town's selling tickets, well, maybe we should give that town back some of the revenues
No, and I
based
think
on it. But then you also run into a situation with the state, with the Commonwealth, when the budget is divvied up. They're always trying to take more and keep it toward in the state coffers rather than hand it out on the cherry sheet or on the Chapter 90 or on the Chapter 70. On the Chapter 70, one question.
Sure.
Special ed.
Yep.
Now, I know what happens if you get a child enrolled in September, and in October that child moves, you still got that allocation right up until June.
Right.
But now that child moves from, we'll say, Grafton to Northbridge.
Yep.
Not a big move, next town over.
No, not really. A couple of minutes.
But it's a child that has a serious problem and has a very high amount of money required to keep them into the system. Northbridge doesn't get that.
Right.
I've argued for years, and I've had every superintendent I spoke with, and I've spoke with a few of them, that agreed with me. The money should follow the child.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and this has been tried in Boston over and over, and they just can't get that changed.
And I would agree with your position on it. I think it's something, it's something that Westboro has gone through. I'll just give you a quick example. Four years ago, there was a situation where a special ed student moved in, right before the October town meeting, so I guess it was probably in September.
Yep.
And the need was about $150,000 to service this one student. But actually, the student didn't move in. It was a situation where parents were divorced,
Yep.
and one of the two parents moved to town.
Right.
And so we were obligated, even though the child never set foot in Westboro, never lived in Westboro, we were obligated to foot the bill for $75,000. And because of the way it was structured, we had to pull that money out of our money that we had left.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not in there, so you got to get it from somewhere.
Right, and it's hard because at that point, in September or October, the school budget's already set, and
You're
so
right.
even though, like in Westboro, our school budget's about $38 million. So even though you might think, and this is how I looked at it initially, 60 grand, 75 grand, that's a drop in the bucket when you're talking about 38 million. But when that budget's already been set and those teachers' salaries have already been
Well, it's
contracted.
not a drop in the bucket when you look at, because everything is allocated to a certain part of the budget.
Well, that's the point, yeah.
So where do you take it from that budget? Well, you can take a few bucks here and a few bucks there, but that is not that easy to do.
And it's really not, especially when the school year started. It makes
Right.
it critically hard because you've already allocated the funds,
And-
to the different
And
programs.
like I said, it just doesn't seem to happen.
Right, and I couldn't give you a reason for why, but
To me, it makes sense. Well,
it makes common sense.
I could understand that. Okay, if the money has been sent down, you'd have to send it back, but that is not that big a deal.
No, and it could always be sent back and then reallocated, but
Right.
you wouldn't want it to happen obviously in a long span of time. So.
Well, but what they can do is you can let them keep the money, but tell them that, okay, that person has left your town. They're in this town now. Oh, we're going to fund that person over in this town, but you're going to owe this money. So next year,
Yeah.
when we send your allocation down, we're going to deduct that.
Right. That makes sense, I think.
There's
Yeah.
ways of doing it.
Yeah, I think there are ways of looking at it from a more equitable point of view.
Yeah,
and I think
it
it'd be a good
makes sense.
suggestion. Yeah, I think it make a good suggestion.
Now, I think on the road, part of the problem is that the Chapter 90 monies, as great as they are, and when you talk $300,000 coming to Northbridge, it's a lot of money.
It is.
But in the case that roads are so far gone that they are at the
Yeah.
point that they need to be rebuilt, and in some cases drainage put in, it's a little tougher than throwing a coat of asphalt down.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or what they did years ago, and I don't know I don't know exactly what the story is, but we don't oil roads anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Oil and
noticed that,
sand.
Yeah.
Blue chip. We don't do that anymore. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that. Someday, if I think about it, I'll ask the DPW.
But and it's one of those things too about the roads is I just saw that recently Northbridge, and I know there was some kind of controversy over it, but they created a long-term, I guess, a financial team or a financial planning team. And
Yes.
when I read the article in the paper, it seemed like part of the impetus for it was trying to do a push for more capital planning. And we have a capital planning committee in Westboro too, and one of the things, we have a new town manager who's been there about a year and a half almost, and one of the things he's really pushed for specifically on roads is trying to do a 10 or 15 year projection out.
Yep.
And looking at when we're going to have the funds to do a particular road project, because also when roads are redone in a neighborhood, neighbors are going to have some concerns about when the work is being done, about I've heard even things about concerns about trees being removed, about many things,
Well,
how it's going to affect buses. And so I think it's important though for capital projects like that from a financial standpoint, but also just from a good neighbor standpoint, it's important I think to do capital planning.
Well, yeah. Well, anybody in business knows you have to do capital
Right.
planning.
Well.
And you have to
True.
figure for long term. You got to build a budget up that you can cover the emergencies as they come. Towns seem to have that problem now because they're digging into their reserve funds just to balance the budgets.
Yeah.
But every year we've been told the last 2 years now that under the Patrick administration, it's been they've sent down the same money as they sent the year before on the local aid.
Right.
You're involved with it.
Yeah.
Because they said we just don't have it. It's just not there to give out.
Right. Well, and I think one of the the state budget is so huge, and one of the things that I applaud the legislature this term for working towards is greater transparency in the budget and starting to put some of the information online. It's a small step, but one of the things I did as a selectman in Westboro was I pushed the town to include a pie chart in tax bills showing people how their money is being spent. And the reason I bring it up to begin the answer to your question is a few weeks ago I was door knocking in Upton, and a gentleman was talking to me, and he said, well, what waste would you try to get rid of? And I said, it's a really interesting question, because I guarantee that there is some waste up there. I mean, I think anybody would say that. Some might disagree where, how much. But the reality is that you or I, as a layperson, it's very hard for us to get our hands on the specific budget information. And so, as a representative, I would like to try to do more to provide that information to the residents of the district. But really what I'd like to do is just to get up there and to see where money is being allocated and how it's being spent in the different departments. Because my feeling is, if you're talking about something, everything from education to public safety, the people that are in the trenches, every day are the people who are paid, for example, by the town of Northbridge. The people who are handling the education of those youngsters in Northbridge are the ones who are paid by the town, who work here in the town, who are employees of the town. Same with the police, same with the roads crew, same with the fire. And I think it's really important that we look at the state bureaucracy and we say, okay, what are the essential services that are being done here with the goal of helping municipalities, and what are some of the things that maybe are being repeated, that we can maybe put more money aside for local aid. A few years ago when Christy Myhos, ran for governor as an independent, he had, I think the idea was Proposition 1, and it was that, flat 40% of the state's revenue would go right back, no questions asked, essentially, into cities and towns. And
but then the state comes back and says, wait a minute, we have an unfunded pension fund we have to take care of.
Yeah.
That's a big nut to crack.
It is.
For us. And we've got to pay all the salaries. We have employees that they need to be paid, and we have to pay their medical coverage.
Well, I think it's a tough balance, and there are a lot of people working for the state that are incredibly hard employees that do a lot of great work for the state. But I think it's just a matter of looking, at what is, another interesting thing about New England, obviously, is, we were talking about town meeting when the show started. We've had cities and towns since the inception.
Right.
I have a good friend of mine who I went to college with, became a city councilor in a city called Willoughby Hills, which is about 10,000 people in Ohio, near Cleveland. And I was driving in, and the sign said, "Welcome to historic Willoughby Hills, incorporated in 1952." And then I was reading an interesting biography on Sarah Palin, and it mentioned that when she became mayor, of the city of Wasilla, I think it was incorporated in like 1974, and they were just, when she was mayor, was when they were looking to build a police force and do these things. And so I think it's important, for us in Massachusetts to really look at what are the goals, what are the objectives, what are the reasons, essentially, for having local government, and how can the state best support it, and what is the best role of the state? Because I think there are a lot of interesting models out there in different states, and, obviously we really don't have county government. A lot of the states, and I lived for a time after I went to college in Virginia, and in there it's all counties. The schools, the roads.
Well, if you go to other parts of the country, they have cities and towns, but the county is really the functioning municipal part of it.
Yeah.
Because it's more regionalized.
That's true, and it depends. Some places like Virginia, cities are actually separate from the county, and everything in the county basically has control.
Oh, we got a call.
Oh, great.
Go ahead, caller. You're on.
Hi, Harry. This is a great show. Thank you so much for having Tim on. So, Tim, both my parents are public school teachers, and I was relieved to hear that you were also a school teacher. They're not public school teachers in the district, unfortunately, but I was wondering if you could talk about how being a public school teacher has influenced what you do as a selectman, and how that would give you a special perspective if you were to be elected a state representative.
Well, thank you very much for the call. And basically, it's kind of what I was saying earlier. I think, being a selectman and a teacher at the same time has helped me to really understand the balance between the financial restrictions of a community and the need for a high-quality school district. And, I think being a state representative would be the same thing. You know, I'll give you one example of an anti-bullying bill that was passed recently by the legislature, and you know, it's the type of bill that you know, the intentions were incredibly sound. I would have supported it. It's a great thing that the legislature brought it up, but I think being a teacher and someone who works, you know, with issues like bullying every